White flag here.
Blaney goes to block.
Crosses out, checker flag. That's a flag. Awesome drive, man. Awesome drive.
It's nice to close out a race like that. That was awesome.
This is the Team Blaney Podcast.
Welcome everyone to 2023 season episode 28 of the Team Blaney Podcast. My name is Adam Rogers, and alongside me is co-host Steve Mez. As always, this podcast is brought to you by fans for fans. Steve and I have been following the drivers of the Blaney racing family for 2 decades, and Team Blaney itself launched on social media in 2014. Now, each weekly episode of the podcast offers an in-depth analysis of Ryan Blaney's latest NASCAR Cup Series race, plus news, notes, and a lineup of special guests all throughout the year. This week, we break down the number 12 team's run in the Firekeepers Casino 400 this past weekend, actually this past Sunday and Monday at Michigan International Speedway. Steve, I actually think you should be welcoming me.
Yeah, welcome back to Ohio.
Yeah, welcoming me to this episode of the Team Blaney Podcast.
Yes, as we're in my humble studio here in the Boardman, Ohio area. Adam and his wife Tara have come north, and we all got to go up to Michigan Speedway on Sunday morning. Adam, Tara, and then our friends Jerry and Kirsten, the Mariottis. The 6 of us actually went to the event and got a little wet, dried off, got a little bit of sun, watched a little bit of racing, almost halfway.
Yep.
And then we had to come home. Actually, Jerry and Kirsten were able to stick around and watch the rest of it. So we got some nice live reports from them, a couple videos and pictures.
Yeah, so that was an interesting experience. It was our first time at Michigan. Steve and I and Tara and then Kate and Steve have been marking off like lots of bucket list tracks or just more tracks they haven't been to before. They've been to Michigan plenty of times. Tara and I had never been to Michigan before, so it wasn't the best experience just because of the weather. But the staff and everybody there was welcoming. The race fans were welcoming. And they tried their best. I think we were like 25 laps short of getting to halfway and calling it a day. Unfortunately, like Steve said, we couldn't go back to watch the finish. Watched it on TV. So that was interesting. We are, for the first time, actually doing like a Facebook Live with this right now. So we talked to some of the folks that were watching there at the time, but said this is only the second time ever we've done the podcast in person together in the 3 years that we've been doing this. So everything's been done remotely. We usually meet on Zoom, record there, edit it separately, and upload it. So it's kind of exciting to be together again. And the last time we were together was under special circumstances.
Yeah, we had, it was the 2 days after the All-Star race. We were in the Mooresville area the day after the All-Star race. So we were over somebody's area, somebody's house they let us record from. And it was really nice that we had a chance to do that. We were all recovering from our hangovers the night before. We got invited to the special celebration for the $1 million. So yeah, that was kind of a cool experience. This is kind of nice. There, like I said, the Facebook Live, you'll be able to see the nice little background we have here. We're actually sitting in it real nice and neat, and got it behind us, so it's kind of a nice little visual. But if you don't get the Facebook Live and you're listening to the podcast, I think the Facebook Live ends up posting at some point as a video. Yeah. So at some point, if you're listening to this and you want to go back to the Team Blaney Facebook page, and it should post on there at somewhere too. So.
Yeah. So you mentioned the fact that we kind of get everyone else that's watching the video gets to see things behind the scenes. This is the first time I actually get to see you go through your notes live in person as well. Because folks don't already know, Steve and Kate spend every Sunday watching the race. Steve takes a copious amount of notes as it goes on. Kate's manning social media to kind of give him tips as it's going on. While meanwhile in Florida, I'm at home just enjoying the race and going on with my day. Because more of my stuff happens on the back end of things after we record. So Steve said they spend so much time, so much dedication into bringing you guys the race reports week to week. So now I get to actually see the notebook in person and see him flip through it. And I don't want to wait any longer. So why don't we jump in to the weekend at Michigan, extended weekend at Michigan. And a lot of that's going to start off with practice and qualifying.
Yeah, what's interesting here is like the notebook that you speak of is really, really going to be kind of abbreviated based on the fact we went to the race. There's so much more data that I'm able to collect when I'm sitting and watching at home because I can pull up the in-car camera and listen to the audio and actually literally write things down. But when I'm at the track, we try to enjoy the race, try to enjoy ourselves, and so this will be a little more black and white. Not as much meat as we normally get, but it's still pretty good detail. So Saturday's practice there, Ryan was in Group A, and he was second quick behind the 24 in Group A. And that was his second time on the track, actually. The first time out on the track, he was fastest for a little while. They came back in, I think it was like after 7 or 8 laps, came back in. And, of course, everybody does the same thing. They go back out, and they've improved a little bit. And sure enough, the second lap he runs in his second time out, he gets himself back up to second quick, right behind that 24. And overall, ends up, when they combine the speeds from both Group A and Group B, he ends up 6th quick behind the 19, and we're only talking 0.122 back of the 19.
Yeah, and that's not too bad considering the last couple of weeks, and I think you even mentioned it on last week's episode of the podcast, just saying that it's been a little bit disappointing because the team that got so many poles last year and made the top 10 in qualifying so many times last year has been struggling a little bit to break into that top 10 again, to be able to go run for the pole. So right off the bat here at Michigan, they're showing speed. And that was exciting because it's finally maybe they at least got past that. Mm-hmm. But we kind of knew that a lot of the Fords and the Toyotas especially were running pretty well on these bigger, faster tracks this year. And I think a lot of that has to do with some of that Rouse Yates horsepower they had under the hood.
Yeah. So qualifying, Ryan went out 13th in Group A there, and he did held on to one of the top 5 spots. So when it comes for the pole qualifying there, he ends up 9th. I think it was the 9 car was the only one that wasn't faster. And the 20 car ends up winning the pole on Saturday. So, top 10 starting spot, always important, and really important for pit selection too.
Now, this isn't Ryan related, but on my way over here, actually, I listened to XM and the NASCAR channel a lot. And this didn't apply to Ryan this week specifically, but it's applied to him before. You have to remember when the A group and B group are done qualifying, all those times are combined together. So the lineup isn't set by everybody in Group A starts on the inside lane, everybody in Group B starts on the outside lane or something like that. And actually they combine all the speeds together because a Kyle Larson fan had called into one of the shows and said, Kyle qualified 6th in his group, but he started 17th. Shouldn't he have started 12th? And they were kind of confused by that, and they didn't understand why that happens. And actually, it's just because the Group B speeds ended up being a lot faster, and he kind of just gets bumped down the board. So if you don't qualify in that top 10, after that, it's straight up by speed, no matter what group you're in. Again, we've had to deal with that the last few weeks with this one team.
Last week for sure. Last week was...
But this week we didn't.
We didn't have to worry about it. Stay in the top 10, you don't have to worry about it at all. So we get to Sunday's race. They moved up the start time a hair. It was going to be at 2:30 exactly instead of... like 2:40 something.
And I have to say, Bob and Jeff and, all those NASCAR reporters were inundated with, why didn't they move up this start to noon? Could have got this thing going earlier. We're in that parking lot in Brooklyn, Michigan up there, tailgating a little bit. It was pouring at noon.
Yeah,
so
noon wasn't working.
The earliest this race could have started was maybe 2:15, and they ended up starting at 2:30. So anybody that thinks that it could have started much earlier than that, if you weren't there in person, you wouldn't know that it meant there was a pretty big downpour out there in the parking lot.
Yeah, so we get stages of 45, 120, and 200. 7 sets of tires, a fuel run of 46 to 50 laps. To the rear, we had the 7, the 15, the 42. But here's the thing, pit stall 14 with the 31 in front of him, but it's open behind him. And that's what I said. The earlier you get a pit selection, you can find those spots on pit road where you got an opening either behind you or in front of you, and then, everybody fills in around you. But if you've got an opening behind you, it makes it way easier to come in at whatever angle you need to come in. Competition caution for roughly lap 20, Adam's favorite, but anytime it rains, it's going to do that.
All the rain.
So we get to the start, and actually there was a little bit of a delay, and there was, the misting, and this happens all throughout the next hour or two on Sunday. But we get to start with Bell on the outside, leading from the outside lane. Ryan, once again, settles into P10 basically in the first lap or two. The restarts are totally wild. That's where a lot of guys try to make their hay. And as we find out with Ryan a couple times during Sunday, some people tried to make their hay and didn't do a very good job of it. By lap 5, The 19 passes the 20 for second, and the 1 is leading, I think, at that point. Lap 13, the 19 passes the 1 for the lead. So the 19, he was pretty strong early in the race here. By lap 14, the 8 car crashes, I have written here. Runs out of talent.
Yeah, this was an interesting incident here because the 8 spotter tried to clarify what he said on the radio on Twitter, formerly known as Twitter, because what they broadcast on the MRN radio that we're listening to at the track and on TV, I guess, he said, "Oh, the 12 came down on you. You know, he's been doing that, you know, all race," or something like that, and like, you know, the crew chief agrees, and Kyle is basically saying the fact that, you know, he thought Ryan wrecked him. So I mean, I watched the replay several times. I watched it on the big screen at the track. To me, much similar to what an incident that's going to happen a little bit later in this race that luckily doesn't wreck any cars. It just seemed to me like the 8 dove way down into the turn, tried to make the pass, and that was very hard to do at this track, and kind of washed up a little bit into the 12. I thought, I mean, they're kind of going for the same real estate a little bit, but the bottom car still, I mean, if you're not going to make that pass, you gotta bail, and he did it, and it's not the first time the 8 car has backed it into the wall on the track this year.
Yeah, I mean, he was on the outside of it, and he wiggled. He lost air, and, you know, and later on with Ryan's situation with Corey, Ryan ends up on the outside but holds on to it. So it's just one of those things. You lose the air for the car, you either have to bail on what you're trying to do, or if you keep your foot in it, which I think that's the problem. Kyle kept his foot in it, and he spun himself out. Really, it comes down to that, because you have to know that you know, are not going to overtake, especially, like I said, unless you really, really had a fast car, and there were only a couple cars that were that fast. You weren't going to make that pass on the outside. So we get here, the competition caution actually comes at this point a little early. 11 cars stay out. The 19, the 17, the 54, 23, the 9, the 12, the 99, the 45, 2, 6, 41. And the reason I bring these things up is this is all of a sudden, alternate strategies. Certain cars get on one type of pit strategy where their fuel is going to be different, and tire wear and so forth. It gives them an opportunity to do something a little different later on, so it kind of splits the field up a little bit early in the race. Sometimes these strategies come back together. On this day, they kind of stayed the way they were, and this is the group that Ryan ends up with near the end of the race. The restart at lap 20, the 19 leads, Ryan's up to 6th, and he gets himself up to 5th within the first lap there. And then at lap 34, the 9 car has his tire issue. Now we got cars staying out. We got the 19, the 54, the 23, the 99, the 6, the 5, the 7, the 47, the 31. So Ryan does pit at this point, and this will make it so that later on he doesn't have to take as much fuel. And a part of this, this is a 4-tire stop. It's 10.144, which is pretty fast. Yep. Almost sub 10. But part of this is, believe it or not, they think they may be racing to the rain. Here are a couple things on the spotter channel, especially at the beginning of the second stage, where they think that they might get to lap 100 and then have it rain. So some of this is, you know, dealing with the possibility of you know, making it to halfway. Restart lap 39, Ryan's in 15th. By lap 45, the 19 wins the stage, Ryan's in 16th. You know, they come to pit here, and the 47 takes no tires on his pit stop. Ryan stays out. Okay, so they pitted a little earlier. Now they're going to stay out and get in the group with some different cars here. Lap 50, the 48 takes the lead to the restart here. And then at lap 42, the next lap, the 42 spins in turn 4. Ryan's up to 5th. So now we get a restart at lap 55 with the 48 leading, and a caution at lap 64 with the 20 spinning out.
Lots of natural cautions in this race, and I can't remember what it was like last year, which I think there probably was still a decent amount, but it was funny. I think Chris Rice from Colleague Racing was putting out like a contest asking people to guess whether there would be a natural caution in the first stage or not, or whether there would or there wouldn't. And there was plenty then, and then plenty now as we start into the second stage. And the cars, they said, were just kind of on edge. We talked a little bit about people putting other people in bad aero positions. So it's just an example of that happening once again, and we see it. And honestly, I think it's good to have natural cautions and not only just stopping at stage breaks.
Yeah, and this one with the 20, he was trying to pass the 48. He was another one with an aero thing here. The one was the lead at the time. Ryan was up to 5th. We get a 2-tire stop here, 5.206 seconds. Penske puts this up on line. It's a really cool thing to watch because they film it from that open box that they had behind them. They're kind of like leaning out, and they show the guys run over to that right side and get it done. And man, it was a great 2-tire stop here.
One thing I wanted to bring up on this subject about this 2-tire stop thing, if you guys remember back a few races ago, the 12 team had an issue where they tried to do a 2-tire stop at the end of a race, and Ryan actually ran over the hose for front tire changer Ryan Flores. On the radio communication for this race specifically, Jonathan came over the radio and said, "You're going on the changer." So they talked about after that race, when they had that incident, that they're going to clean up their communication and make sure everybody is on the same page when it comes to a 2-tire stop like this to know, do I go on the jack? Do I go on the crew chief? Do I wait until the tire changer is across? It sounds like they've settled on, you wait until you see that tire changer go across, and that's what happened. He ran across, Ryan shoots out of the box, and they have a really great stop.
And actually, watch the video carefully as he runs. He doesn't just run right around the front of the nose. He runs out away from the car and across at an angle, so that basically Ryan could turn right and go around him if he had to. It's kind of an interesting little piece of choreography that I don't know if anybody picked up on or not. But he doesn't run right around the front of the nose of the car. No, he runs out in front of the car at an angle back toward pit wall at like a 45-degree angle. So when Ryan goes to pull out, he can pull out and just barely miss him with the left-hand side of the car if need be, making a right. So it's a really kind of cool thing to look at if you can find that video. I think you actually retweeted it.
I think so. Yeah.
So the restart's at lap 68 from P5 here. The next few laps is when the LaJoie incident happens. So, we are racing with him, and Corey is on the inside, and he dive bombs it into 3 and 4, and he did not do a very good arc.
No, and it looks like he mentioned he did several. He did interviews at the track, interviews on TV, interviews on radio. He mentioned that he got loose. He did get loose kind of for a second, but it just didn't seem like he wasn't going to make the corner. And Ryan probably thought he had the position to begin with, which he did. And in Ryan's post-race interviews, he said he thought LaJoie just dove it in there way hard with no chance to make it at all. And I feel like Steve and I both listened to his podcast. I feel like we like Corey. We like the work that he's put in. My thing was and he mentioned this when he was leading the race at Atlanta last year. Like, I feel like he just doesn't have enough experience running up front yet to know what kind of risks to take and when and at what time and around what guys you can do it against. And it just seems like he needs to learn a little bit more about that and get a little bit more comfortable running up front, which he's going to need to, because every year the Spire Motorsports team has been incrementally getting better. And honestly, he wasn't necessarily up front just on strategy. They had a pretty decent car that kind of got him up there. And I just think he was a little bit desperate. He was up front and he wanted to stay up front because, as the drivers will say, no matter what track it is, it's so hard to pass in these cars, so aero dependent, it's hard to get around people, and he just doesn't want to give up that track position, but instead they end up giving up like 10 spots.
They play the main interview they play, the main one they show right off the bat is the one where he makes the joke about the kickball. There's a secondary interview where they show the whole interview, and they give you the end of the interview, and as you listen to the last 30 seconds of it, it's like a minute and a half long, it's on NASCAR's YouTube page. If you listen to the whole interview, he really literally apologizes. Without saying I'm sorry, he apologizes for what he did. He knows he was in the wrong, but these guys are never going to say, I'm wrong. They won't come out and say that. But he knows that he did something he shouldn't have tried to do. One thing I said about the aero thing is Ryan in this situation was on the outside, and he was able to control his aero situation and not spin out, which, luckily, he had to back off to do it, though, once again.
So in another post-race interview, Corey calls into what's normally the post-race show that Claire B. Lang hosts on XM. Called into there, they rehashed the whole thing once again, and he says on there, I don't know if he said this at the at-track interview as well or anything else he did on TV, he said that Ryan Blaney like makes his money by putting people in bad arrow spots. Like when I get the sense a lot of times that Ryan's always on the short end of the stick when it comes to these things.
Yeah, that's funny to hear that. I mean, that's super. He thinks that, but
maybe we don't see it. We don't see every pass that's happening throughout the field, but
maybe
I tend to think that Ryan gets taken advantage of more than he takes advantage of other people. So
some of these restarts, were totally wild, and it's because they didn't have enough mechanical grip. And he had to lose a spot or two and then try to gain it back. So I don't know what Corey's saying there, but Corey actually is the who came up into him in a way that sure he put Ryan in the bad arrow spot there actually. So
now one other thing to mention, you just said this. The spotters are telling these drivers that they might be racing to halfway, and this isn't that far off from when this race gets halted in the first place. So. Does that change your outlook on this incident? Honestly, I think we're giving it too much time because I keep bringing up more things, but they were getting aggressive at this point because who knows? He just wants to get a good finish at this point, and they were running toward the top 10.
They were like 8th, 9th, 9th, 10th back in that area, and this causes Ryan to run all the way back to 16th, and at that point. It makes me wonder about those 4 or 5 spots where they would be down the line at the end of the race if they'd had them. So, but lap 74, we get the caution for the rain, and we're at the track, and we know that we have to go back to work on Monday. We didn't really plan for the extra day. Jerry and Kirsten actually, or the Mariottis, were able to stick around, which is awesome.
We tried to stay. We stayed until it stopped raining. Mm-hmm. We're like, okay, this might look good. And then it downpoured. I'm like, all right, we're going home. And, it's about like a 4-hour drive to get there. Yeah. So we already talked about it. We didn't go back, but lucky Jerry and Kirsten did get to go back and see it. But we were headed for the exits with several other people and getting a little wet and muddy and trying to navigate our way out of that parking lot. But during that delay before they canceled and postponed to the next day, all they kept showing was Ryan and Corey. To have to bring this up again, Ryan and Corey talking on pit road because they actually got out of their cars and they got to chat about it, and they talked for a long time, actually separated and then came back together again, talked some more.
They look pretty civil.
And then they interview Corey on the track Jumbotron, and so he got to talk about it there. I believe they said that Ryan, USA, NBC, approached him to do an interview. He declined.
Kim Kuhn walked up to him, actually. Kim walked up to him. They've got a good relationship, obviously. And I think he just kind of told him, let's not go there. Yeah,
they got a whole other rest of the race
around. And the truth is he also knows that Corey's got the podcast and he doesn't. So Corey's going to get the last word this week on his podcast. Although Ryan, if Corey says something that ticks you off and you want to come on our podcast again, you're more than welcome to come back on here and we'll straighten Corey out from this angle.
So at this point, we're postponed until Monday at noon is what they were shooting for. Forecast didn't honestly look great, and it does get delayed a little bit longer. They went to 12:30, and then I think 12:45 is just probably around the time they kicked things off. But they did get a break in the radar. Yeah. I mean, I'm watching the radar from in Ohio and kind of watching and see what's happening in Michigan, and I'm like, they're going to get this thing in, and you know what they do? They only had 125 laps to go.
Yeah. So. What's interesting about it is they do fire them up, they get out there, but they don't actually end up restarting till lap 82.
Yep.
So they run another 7 or 8 laps on their caution because a couple times they were going to go green and then they called it off. Then they were going to go green and they called it off because they were getting missed on the pace truck. So we got the 19 leading here at this restart, lap 82. Ryan up to 11th because a couple cars did pit.
Now this, you're talking about fuel strategy. This actually kind of changes things again. It's almost like restarting the day, where the folks that pitted here later on in the race aren't going to have to wait on fuel in their final pit stop, and this is going to come into play. So Ryan stays out, which means in his final pit stop they are going to have to wait a little bit longer than maybe some other people. But what this strategy call did do was it took him from 16th or 17th on the grid because of that incident with LaJoie, moved him back up towards the top 10. Yeah, so I think that the risk reward there was definitely worth it.
Yeah. The 45, the 48, the 5, the 3, the 54, 7, 47 do pit there. Lap 83, the 23 takes the lead. Lap 99, the 19 takes the lead from the 23. Ryan is running 11th, about this, like I said, 11th, 10th, 11th. Lap 102, we get caution for the 41 who had a tire go down. Ryan does a 4-tire stop here, 10.377, really good. Now he comes out 14th. Now, like I said, some cars stayed out here. So he went in 11th, come out 14th, but 3 or 4 cars actually stayed out. So he really didn't lose ground on the pit stop itself. Came to everybody on different strategies. We restart lap 107. Ryan runs about 12th or 13th through this restart, and then at lap 120, the 19 wins the stage, and Ryan ends up by 14th here for stage 2. So no stage points in either stage.
Which that's going to come up when we go over what the standings are after this week.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, the last few weeks here, they haven't really picked up any stage points, so that's not going to do much to keep them in their position in the top 10. So
at this stage break here, the 17, the 45, the 12, the 4, the 10, the 38, the 34 stay out. We get our restart at lap 126. Ryan is up to 3rd on this restart, and we get a caution for the 48.
rough day for Hendrick Motorsports. We've already had the 9 back it into the fence. Now the 48 gets caught up in a crash. I think that was kind of happening in front of him.
Mm-hmm.
The 5 until the end wasn't really running that great. So rough day for them. So if you think Team Penske has its struggles, I feel like Hendrick the last few weeks has been on the struggle bus too.
Yeah, I mean those who wanted to exchange pit teams, the 24 car has. The 22 car has a 20-some second pit stop in this race. So that's where the 22 went. The 22 speed was pretty good during the day too, really. But so at lap 133 restart with the 17 now leading and Ryan in 3rd. And by lap 149, Ryan's running 5th. And then we start some green flag pit stops. And like Adam said here, during this, you're going to see some guys who are in one strategy able to do things a little quicker than other guys, and then meshing back in where you mesh back in, and it's going to be different depending. Lap 159, the 45 had just pitted, and he has a tire issue, and luckily he's able to get back in there without a caution.
And the thing to note about him, he was running up front, he was challenging for the lead before this. When he made his pit stop and came out, he actually ended up getting ahead to where he probably is going to be leading this race, but has an issue here with another wheel loose on this car. And this isn't new. Now, last week they had an issue on pit road, but it was the driver who missed the commitment cone. But this isn't the first loose wheel that this 45 team has had this year, and that's unfortunate. This
is something interesting that we'd actually talked about before we recorded, and that is that you were saying when the jack is dropped, if the wheel nut is not tight, you can't tighten it.
Yeah, if that wheel is if the car is sitting on the ground and that changer tries to tighten the lug, it's not going to tighten with the design of this lug nut. I don't know the exact reason why, but I know it can't. So he actually did signal to the jackman to bring the car back up again. The jackman went to go do it, but then the changer tried to tighten it one more time and ran around the car. So the jackman was kind of confused, it looked like, ended up just going back around the car. So it did slow their stop down, but yeah, they just did not get that rear wheel tightened. And the 45 almost lost it out there on the track, but Reddick is very good. He saved the car, got it back down to pit road, was extremely angry and upset on the radio, which I would say he has a right to be, even though he did make his own mistake last week. But they've been put in this position several times this year that have pretty much taken him away. I mean, the Toyotas were very fast today, and he was one of them. But his race is essentially over at that point.
Something really cool happens the next lap. At lap 160, Ryan comes into pit, and as they do, they lead the race.
Yep. They stayed out long enough.
Led the lap, and then come down and got 4 tires and fuel. And I got it at 12.5 seconds. Like I said, it's a little bit longer stop. They're going on the jack, and the jack is waiting for the fuel. So they were trying to make it to the end of the race, plus any kind of situation where you're going to have green, white checkered and so forth. So
Team Penske, as you mentioned, some of the other stops they filmed and put on their social media channels, they did it with this one, and that's kind of where I could confirm that they did wait on fuel. After they come out, Ryan kind of, I don't want to say complains, he asks, why am I in this position? And Josh just tells him it has to do with the way other people were pitting, and Ryan goes, no, I made a bad approach to pit road. But also the waiting on fuel also kind of put him behind a little bit.
Yeah, I kind of forgot about that, and I didn't write that in the notes. I'm glad you remembered that, because we did hear it on the radio. So he believes that he may have lost a second or two in his approach to pit road. And, you know, you don't always hear about that. Most of the times drivers don't even say anything. You know, Ryan pretty much admitted, you know, on the radio, like we heard it. So, you know, it might only be a second. But then again, once again, like I said, how they blend back in, knowing you got to wait on fuel, you know, it lost a couple positions. But by lap 181, the green flag cycled through, and 17 is back to the lead here. Ryan is in 8th. So he did lose a couple spots. But like I said, it could have been that, could have been a combination of that, and a couple of cars, like the 6 car, you know, may have had to take less fuel, you know. So
several, and I'm sorry if I jump ahead here.
Okay.
You might be mentioning it, but there are several guys that run long here.
Mm-hmm.
The 5, the 99, the 6, and maybe a couple others. And this is going to impact the finish of this race because some people are going to come and some people are going to go, and some of them end up with pretty good finishes by staying out long. And I thought it was interesting that, you know, our social channels, we get, you know, positive comments, negative comments, and one of the negative comments that I saw was, you know, why do we always do this strategy where we just wait so long and staying out there? It never works out. And I'm like, well, was able to name 4 or 5 cars that they did that this race, and they got a top 10, top 5 finish.
Yeah, it works.
So it can work.
You know, it's hit and miss. You know, you make a strategy call, and, you know, 9 times out of 10 it works. What happens if the caution falls at the wrong time? You know, what happens if the caution falls at the right time? You know, so you have to try to do something a little bit different than some other people. And there were like about 3 different types of strategies out there this weekend, and you saw they kind of, some of them came back together a little bit and some didn't.
And I mentioned earlier, if Hassler does not make that decision after they come back on Monday to stay out, to get that track position back after the incident with the Joy, I don't think Ryan is racing in the top 10 as easily as he was at the end of this race.
Yeah, so, you know, he made a good move to get him back up there. Lap 187 through 194, we got a 17 and a 19 battling for the lead. Ryan is in 9th at this point, behind the 4. The 4 was able to pass him. The rest of the race I'm watching, I was able to watch some of it, the in-car camera, and Ryan tries to get to the 4 the last bunch of laps.
Seemed like they were pretty close.
They battled pretty good there to the end, but 17 does win, and Ryan does end up finishing 9th, which is a great top 10. You know, a little bit better week this week than last week. So,
I mean, one positive of the weekend, Fords were strong. Roush Fenway Keselowski Racing, first back-to-back wins since Carl Edwards in 2010. So, remember, Chris Buescher won the race at Richmond. Everyone, you know, not everyone, but, you know, people were generally happy for the guy. He's a hard worker. He's a guy that worked in the fab shop at Roush Racing for a while to try to earn his keep. Keselowski keeps him on, even though people thought maybe they'd dump him and he'd get a bigger name driver or something like that. And he ends up being the guy that puts that team back in victory lane 3 times now in the last 2 years. So kudos to them. They found something. There's been a lot of discussion in our Discord chat and on other social media sites about who's the best Ford team right now. People already kind of write off SHR because Harvick's really the only high-performing team there. So I kind of went through the stats. And at first I thought, there's no way that RFK has been out-driving Team Penske. And it turns out they haven't, but they're pretty neck and neck. This was Chris Buescher's 5th top 5, 10th top 10, second win of the year. Ryan is sitting with Penske, sitting at 1 win, 4 top 5s, and 11 top 10s. Brad Keselowski is sitting at 5 top 5s and 10 top 10s, no wins. Joey's sitting at 1 win, I think like 11 top 5s, or not 11 top 5s, like 6 top 5s and 11 or 12 top 10s as well. So they're kind of neck and neck here, and they're even on wins as organizations go.
Yeah.
So I don't know that there's necessarily a front runner, but it's just kind of funny to see a lot of fans. You know, Ryan gets a top 10 finish, I think kind of, you know, resolving or solving or, you know, bouncing back from what happened early in the race, and I was kind of okay with that finish. But you know, the people that want that instant gratification are like, oh, he needs to be in a 3rd car at RFK next year, and it's like, whoa. Yeah. Both of the teams right now are operating at about the same level, and Logano is kind of has a little bit of advantage over everybody. But I think it's a little bit too early to jump the gun on that. Yeah. And I'm just saying it's great, it's good. You know, this is a legacy team over there at Roush. It's had many names over the years. I'm not going to be sad about them running well. I think that's good, and they're a Ford partner, and maybe Ford will put a little bit of pressure on them to maybe share some information as to what they might have found over the last several weeks when it comes to speed.
You know, the thing is the next couple of weeks, or the end of the regular season is the end of the regular season. But certain teams hit on certain things at certain tracks sometimes, The last 2 weeks, the RFK car's been really good.
Well, look at Penske at Phoenix.
And that's what I was going to bring up. Penske at Phoenix, last year, the best 2 cars finished 1-2, and actually it could have been the other way around. They were both that fast. So, hitting at the right thing at the right track is very important. These guys now, especially RFK, will be. I think both guys are going to make the playoffs. Keselowski's pretty solidly in there. You're going to be looking at those guys working on those last 6 races or so down the stretch, trying to make the final 8 and then make the final race.
So we mentioned earlier the fact that the 12 team did not gain any stage points in this race, so that actually does hurt them when it comes to the overall standings. Did get a pretty decent finish with the 9th place finish, but he does slip another position in the overall point standings to the 10th position. He's now 157 points back of the leader, which is Martin Truex Jr. Last week I think he sat around 130 back or so, and the week prior to that 135 back, so he did lose like 20 plus points in this race because some other people around him did gain those points.
And Martin gains 2 stage wins.
Yeah.
So that kind of helps.
Yeah, he's starting to pull away a little bit when it's going to be coming to all the playoff points that he's got from wins, the playoff points that he's getting from winning these stages, and he's finishing up front constantly. Mm-hmm. And also announced that he's coming back next year.
Yeah,
so everything's coming up Martin right now. So that top 10 right now, again, Truex is in first, Hamlin's in second, Byron's third, Bell is fourth. Man, Bell, he came back. He bounced back for a top 15 finish after backing into the wall earlier in that race. So kudos to that team. If you want to stay in the championship hunt, that's the kind of a day you have to have when you don't have things go your way. Harvick is in fifth without a win still. Larson is sixth. Chastain is seventh. Keselowski is in 8th. He also doesn't have a win. Kyle Busch is in 9th, and Ryan rounds out that top 10. Again, 157 points back of your leader. And that brings us to our next week. But before we do that, because I know we like to chat about who we're going to pick in fantasy, but why don't we recap fantasy? Yeah. Even though after I had a couple of good weeks in a row here, didn't have that great of a fantasy result when it came to the race at Michigan International Speedway. And I'm going to go ahead and take a look at who I had in my starting lineup. And that's going to be, I had Ryan Blaney, so I actually had Blaney in the garage, but I swapped him for Kyle Busch after that incident happened.
Nice move.
So thank you to Michigan for partnering with, I think, Verizon this week, because the Wi-Fi was actually pretty decent. Yeah. So I was able to make my swap because of that and being at the track. So kudos to them. So I started Ryan, he got me 28 points. I got Logano, he got me 27 points. Christopher Bell rallied there, got me 24 points. My big points getter of the week was Hamlin with 37, but then I also had William Byron. We mentioned the struggles for Hendrick Motorsports. Byron also had an incident that kind of took him out of contention and eventually out of the race, so he only gained me 2 points. Featured matchups, I picked Suarez over Buescher. That was wrong. I picked Blaney over Harvick. That was wrong. I picked Jones over Burton. That was right. I picked Kyle Busch over Byron, and that was unfortunately wrong. So we're going to try to pull up
mine real quick here.
Steve's lineup here.
Just go down 1 or 2 spots there. There you go.
Yeah, so let's see what Steve had in this race.
I think if you double click it.
There we go.
There it goes. Okay.
Oh. Well, yeah. Honestly, you didn't have that bad.
Not bad. Yeah, I had Bubba Wallace, Martin Truex, Buescher, Logano, and Bell. And I had Kyle Busch in the starting lineup and swapped him out actually for, I believe it was Bell. So, it's pretty good stage points out of some of those guys. I had Buescher over Suarez. And, man, that Ryan-Kevin thing. I had Ryan over Kevin in one spot. He gets that one spot. That's 10 more points. And, Jones over Burton there. And then I had Kyle Busch over Byron. Yeah. And they both crashed out. Yeah. So it was like
35th and 37th.
Yeah, ouch.
So we both kind of struggled in the featured matchups. You definitely did a little bit better than me when it came to the overall points from your starters. So let's take a look at our top 10 in points earned this past week at Michigan. I'm going to mention you as a consolation here. You ended up with 11, tied for 11th, so you didn't crack into the top 10 there, but you had a pretty decent day. I know I was back there like in the 30s or 40s or something crazy like that. So let's take a look at that top 10 again in points earned for this race at Michigan International Speedway. For the Team Blaney NASCAR Fantasy Live League, tied for 9th, we have Doug QC, that's a new name, and JD Racing with 206 points. In 8th, we have Blaring Idiots with 207 points. In 6th, we have a tie. Front Row John and Blaney or Bust with 208 points. In 5th, we have Cool Guy 2K with 215 points. 4th, Supermod 216. 3rd, Whip Wilson, I think that's another new one, 217 points. 2nd, Colleague Fan 1610, 221 points. In the winner this week in points earned at Michigan International Speedway, Montana 12 Fan, 228 points. Now it's time to take a look at the overall standings in the Team Blaney NASCAR Fantasy Live League. And honestly, I don't even want to take a look at where I'm at. I'm usually in the 40s, but I have a pretty decent feeling, Steve, that you are still at least probably in the top 15. So let's scroll down a little bit and see where you're at. And that is 12th. Not too bad. You're making your way back up. I think you were 15th last week.
Mm-hmm.
So, top 10 now in overall point standings in the Team Blaney NASCAR Fantasy Live League. We have Fike 21, 4,351 points. 9th, Penske Fan 24, 4,352. 8th, JD Racing, 4,353. 7th, Alyssa C, 4,380. In 6th, we have Go Larson, 4,417. In 5th, we have Blaney's Daisy, 4,418. In 4th, Eric D15, 4,423. 3rd, Christian Dana, 4,432. Blaring Idiots in 2nd position, 4,433. And still leading the way in the Team Blaney NASCAR Fantasy Live League in the 1st position in the overall standings, Factory of Sadness 6 with 4,529 points.
Just one little thing before we wrap up last week totally. The sponsor, of course, was Menards with, how do you say it? Knauf, K-N-A-U-F-F insulation on the hood.
Something like that. Yeah, the hood.
They're actually
here somewhere.
really good sponsor, right over my shoulder here. Extremely good sponsor as far as like activating with the fans. And they did a Instagram thing where they were giving away signed autograph hats. Their hats, when you look real close, are fabulous looking hats. It's black.
Yep.
It's got the blue. They've got that blue emblem for their logo, like it was on the hood. There's the 3 colors of the NASCAR colors on the side of the rim, real small, and they were autographed. And anytime you get a chance on Instagram, all it is real simple. It's follow them, tweet something they want you, not tweet, but post something, and then add somebody else on Instagram who's a fan. And I think I always do your wife because I know she's on Instagram, and I think she always does me. And good news, we both won.
That's good, because we need some of that protection the next time we go to a race there to keep the sun out of our eyes. So thank you to them. And like Steve says, a lot of Ryan sponsors go ahead and do that. And we have some assistance here, I think, on Facebook.
Yeah, Knauf Insulation. Tyler Perney. Thank you, Tyler. Knauf. That's how they say it. So that's really cool. I don't always know how to say it, but they're very interactive. Like I said, they message me back to get the address. I message them back. They message me back again. They're not just like, oh, okay, here it is, and that's that. Pretty interactive with the fans. Pretty good sponsor on that car. The couple times they're on there every year.
So we just have 3 races remaining in the NASCAR Cup Series regular season. 2 of them are going to happen at road courses, and then the last one is going to be on the big track in Daytona. But that brings us to this week, and we're heading back to Indianapolis Motor Speedway on the road course, though. And the action is going to kick off. And actually, so the whole weekend is split a little bit because the ARCA Menard Series and the NASCAR Truck Series are actually at, if it's still Lucas Oil, Indianapolis Raceway Park. Mm-hmm. Most people would just know it as IRP. They're going back there again. I think this is the second time in the last couple of years where they're going there with the Truck Series. It was a really great race last year, so glad to see them there. So the weekend actually kind of kicks off there.
This is actually the first race of the playoffs.
That's true
for the Truck Series too. So tune in Friday night for that. Josh will be running with Zane, spotting for Zane on Friday night as they start to defend the title.
Yeah, so if you want to tune into that race, it's at 9 p.m. Eastern Time this Friday, August 11th, the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series T-Sport 200 at Indianapolis Raceway Park. You can watch that on FS1. Then let's switch over to Saturday, August 12th, 11:30 a.m. Eastern Time, the NASCAR Cup Series qualifying on NBC Sports app. So looks like it might not be on TV. It's one of those opportunities where you might have to watch it on streaming instead.
I've got the app.
5:30 p.m. Eastern Time, the NASCAR Xfinity Series Pennzoil 150 on the Indianapolis Road Course. You can catch that on the USA Network.
We don't have it listed there, but the Indy cars are racing this weekend also, right? So they'd probably be before that, I believe, Saturday afternoon?
Yeah, before the Xfinity Series.
Yeah,
right.
so.
And then Sunday, August 13th, that's when the big race of the Cup Series happens. 2:30 p.m. Eastern Time, the NASCAR Cup Series Verizon 200 at the Indianapolis Road Course. You can watch that on the main network, NBC. So, you mentioned the Indy cars. They've already announced that this weekend, next year, they're not going to be there. They're going to be at the Milwaukee Mile. They're actually going back there for the first time, adding another oval track to their series schedule, which is awesome, I think. But that also, paired with the fact that the Cup Series is going to be holding a practice on Monday and Tuesday on the Indianapolis Motor Speedway Oval, put all this together to say this might be the last year for a while the Cup Series runs on the Indianapolis Road Course. And I know you've attended this race. Mm-hmm. What are your thoughts on that?
I think that they're doing something this weekend that they should have done 2 weekends ago, or 2 years ago. And if they had done it 2 years ago, it would have changed how everybody feels about this track and about the racing there. And what I'm saying is that they are going to move the restart zone this weekend, like they did at Chicago's road course or street course. They're going to move the restart zone, and from what I understand, just talking to Josh about it today, they're going to move it to before they come onto the front stretch. So now, instead of everybody balling up, getting 6 wide going into turn 1, now they're going to be spread out, not going to be able to lean on each other because they will be a little more spread out and more likely to spin out if they try to lean on somebody. And you are actually going to see racing into turn 1 now. These last 2 years, it's been a debacle.
Yeah.
A debacle of people just crapping on each other, I don't know how else to put it, into turn 1. And it made it really, really ugly. Except for those who love chaos.
Yeah.
But we don't love chaos because our guy was running in the front the last 2 years at different points and times and could have had a top 5 finish if it wasn't for these knuckleheads going 6 wide and leaning on 3 other cars going into turn 1. And when I say it's 2 years too late, if they would have done this type of thing 2 years ago and we didn't see all these incidents, people would probably think different of the racing, because the racing itself, once they get racing, is pretty good. And last year Ryan was close to leading the race. He did a fuel only pit stop. There was a little bit of a glitch on the pit stop itself, but if the glitch didn't happen, the car stalled. But the glitch didn't happen, they would have come out in front. If they come out in front, then they control those restarts. But he ended up coming out like second or third, which once again, if it's a normal restart at any other normal track, he might have been racing the leader for the rest of the race. Instead, he gets bulldozed by a bunch of guys who put plows on the front of their cars because that's the only way they know how to race. So this year, I can't wait to see what happens. If the tire testing and whatever they do on Monday, Tuesday goes well, that's great, because if they can make it so it's racing next year, that's fine. The problem they had for years and years and years, and the reason they went away from racing the oval was the racing was bad. We had one race years and years ago where Goodyear brought a tire that was crap and ended up having to call caution every 10 laps. But they couldn't get side by side. It was momentum type things. If you got good momentum and good run, then you could pass somebody, and that was it. So if they can figure out how to keep that kind of stuff from happening, get the tires underneath them they need to have, but still have decent tire wear and have some racing, more power to it. I can't wait to see it.
Yeah, so again, if you want to catch this race, Sunday, August 13th, 2:30 p.m. Eastern Time, the NASCAR Cup Series Verizon 200 at the Indianapolis Road Course. You can watch all of that on NBC. Lots of interesting people that have entered this race. We have the return of Shane Van Gisbergen. He's going to be back in the car. We have another, I forget the name, Australian Supercars driver that's actually higher in points than Shane, that's going to be running in the 33 car for Richard Childress Racing.
Yeah.
There's a sports car driver that's also going to be entered in the field. I forget which team at this point. You have Mike Rockenfeller that's going to run in place of Noah Gragson, who's on an indefinite suspension from his Team Legacy Motor Club in NASCAR as well. So there's like a lot of these road course ringer type folks that are going to be racing in this race in Indianapolis. It worked really great for SVG on the street course in Chicago, confined spaces. There was some wet weather in the area, and he kind of drove back through the field and kind of stomped everybody, stole that victory away from the Cup regulars. Indy Road Course is going to be a lot different than that street course was in Chicago, but people are going to be watching really closely as to what these kind of interlopers are going to be able to do. So when it comes to fantasy or picking who you might think run well or win this race, are any of those guys kind of piquing your interest or no?
It's interesting because they've changed the, not only changing the restart, but they've changed it where there's stages, there won't be a caution at the stage breaks.
Yep.
So you're going to get, the strategy is going to be way different now. And you've got the 16, the 34, and the 9, who definitely all three need to win a race. The only way any of those three cars get to the thing now are winning a race. The 23 has done a good job distancing himself from the cut line. The 54 is now above the cut line, and the 54 actually will probably run a pretty good road course race and get a lot of stage points. So
the 99 is only 5 back of the cut line right now as well.
And he's another one that, stage points.
Won at Sonoma a year ago.
Right. Could put himself right back up into the mix. That's an interesting thing. The 54 and the 99 are two to watch this weekend as far as like battling for points and stage points and the finish, because one could pass the other pretty easily. So yeah, there's a lot of good situations there to watch.
Yeah, I think SVG might be somebody that I at least put in the garage. I'm just not sure. I honestly didn't want him to do that. I know he's most likely going to come and probably run a third Trackhouse car in 2024 full-time. That seems to be the way it's leaning. He wants to come run full-time NASCAR racing. But if he was just going to keep the Chicago thing as a one-off, I wish he would have just walked off into the sunset.
Yeah.
Because if he crashes out immediately, it's like, oh man, it just taints that that whole thing, I think. Because you just want to kind of see him just come in, win, and then walk off into the sunset and never see him again.
Friday night, tune into the truck race.
That's right. First Oval Star, right?
He's gonna run the truck race. So let's see what he does with the truck series.
Which is going to be with Nice Motorsports, which is the team that Ross Chastain came up through, who Carson Hocevar, who has 3 wins on the season, drives for. So it's going to be in quality equipment.
Mm-hmm.
First oval race for SVG, though.
Yeah, so let's see what he does with that. So yeah, I think that it's the 9 car. I just have this feeling because they always will draw the drama to the 9
He's
car.
going to win. He's going to win a race. He might even win a Daytona.
The next 2 weeks, the next 3 weeks, yeah. I mean, he can win any one of the next 3 races, put himself in, and I'm sure that NASCAR would love that. NBC would definitely love that.
Now, I don't think you have any starts left for Ryan, and I didn't bring up his stats specifically, but Ryan did finish second in the inaugural race on the road course there in the Indianapolis GP. He was running top 5-ish until that final restart when he kind of gets taken out by the 16 car and AJ Allmendinger on that kind of crazy restart into turn 1 that we're hoping we're not going to see anything like that when it comes to this race. So Ryan has run well there in 2 different types of cars, on the original car before the next gen and then also in the next gen car. So he might be somebody, if you have very limited starts left, you might want to save him for somewhere like Daytona where he can kind of consistently run up front and at least get you some stage points. But he's probably going to be somebody I at least either start or have in my garage, because you never know. They haven't had great road course cars technically this year so far, I think across the board with Penske, because even the 2 car, Cindric, with all of his sports car background, should be running better. Logano has won on a road course before, should be running better. But they've kind of struggled in that area a little bit this year.
I don't know. Ryan has a pole.
That's true.
We go back to Dakota, and that was a total shocker. So, and last year started 6th. So, once again, getting that top 10 to start with, and then see what you can do. But this year, like I said, this year's a whole curveball. This is the 3rd curveball. It's a different generation car, new generation car. Now, no cautions at the stage break. So, yeah, we're going to really see some interesting things on Sunday. Can't wait.
So, Steve, I think that pretty much wraps things up. Like I said, we said at the top of the show, only the second time ever in the 3-season history of the Team Blaney podcast have we been in the same room recording this thing. So if it sounds a little bit different than it usually does, we're just kind of working through some technical things. We're not necessarily set up to do this together as we normally do remotely. But I think no matter what it looks like, what it sounds like, it was fun to actually be in the same room and recording together, especially just a couple of days after we were both at the racetrack, seeing this race and experiencing it in person. So thanks for the hospitality and inviting us over and making the space in this amazing studio that you kind of have set up here. I've never actually seen any of these hoods in person, so it's really cool to see everything. So those that have joined us throughout the show on Facebook Live, hopefully you've enjoyed kind of seeing the expanse of Steve's studio here and kind of the craft projects that he has up behind you that we won't mention are not for sale. They're just for fun. And they make a great backdrop anytime we do record, much like that interview earlier this season that we had with Ryan Blaney, the interview earlier this season we had with Mule, the Tyler specialist, the interview we had earlier this season with crew chief Jonathan Hassler, and any of the other interviews that we've had throughout the last few years. Tony Palmer, the engineer. Yeah. Mm-hmm. All of those are available on our YouTube channel. Just search for Team Blaney on YouTube, and you'll get to see all those great interviews with members of the team, all the way to the driver, Ryan Blaney. So, thank you everyone once again for tuning into this episode of the Team Blaney podcast. If you'd like to learn more about us, just listen to our very first episode that explores our Blaney racing fandom. You can interact with us on Facebook and Twitter, X at Team Blaney, and on Instagram and TikTok at team.blaney. And give us an update on the TikTok. How are things going over there?
Yeah, we're starting to gain some followers. We're doing the Facebook Live version tonight. Like I said, but we'd like to do TikTok Live one of these times on something like this, or at a track. So we need to get to 1,000 followers still. We're working on it. But if you have TikTok, go to Team Blaney on TikTok and follow us. And like I said, at least once a week I'll try to come out with something that'll be like for the preview of the podcast. I've got a couple of videos saved right now. I'm going to see what I can put together by tomorrow morning. Make sure you check out the TikTok.
And finally, we'd like to encourage you to support the Ryan Blaney Family Foundation. This organization, established in 2018, supports causes like the Alzheimer's Association and UPMC Sports Medicine through fundraisers and events and membership in the Blaney Bunch Fan Club. To learn more, visit RyanBlaneyFamilyFoundation.org or follow them on any of their very active social media channels. So, for my co-host Steve Mez, I'm Adam Rogers. We'll catch you next time right here on the Team Blaney podcast.
Good night, Brussels. Check out the TikTok.
Thanks everybody for coming. I hope you enjoyed it.